So, we are back in 2023, and we're here to talk about Harry Potter. What you think about that, Will?
No, I'm just a no.
No, you're not going to play along?
No. That movie burnt me out. It was... I know. There are probably some Potterheads out there who are aghast that I would be burnt out or tired after seeing just the first one, the Sorcerer's Stone. But so I cannot do any more British anything for right now. I'm kind of done.
But you're a wizard, Harry. You're a wizard, Harry.
If you continue this, you're doing this podcast by yourself.
Okay. Okay, so we are back in 2023 with Two Christians Watch, and we are going to go through the entire Harry Potter series, which is 8 films. I think all of them are 2 hours, so that's 16 hours of content to get through.
Out of the frying pan into the fire. You went from one terrible drudging series to another.
We've only seen the first one so far. So I think because we're going to get a synopsis of this film. And before we really get into that, I think we should talk about the cultural context of Harry Potter. So both Will and I, we grew up as American evangelical Christian kids. Do you think that would be correct to say?
Yeah, leaning Baptist / non-denominational.
And in the early 2000s, there was a panic around Harry Potter, as everyone knows, where it was like Christian parents didn't want their kids associated with it. They didn't want them reading the books. They didn't want them watching the movies. They didn't want them doing anything like that because there was this fear that it would lead them to like the occult and like to practice like real witchcraft. And so there was this big like boycott of Harry Potter, and it was kind of considered taboo to enjoy Harry Potter if you were a Christian kid. And my personal story with Harry Potter is that when it first came out, my parents were like, because it was 2001, I was very young. My parents let me see the first movie. So I saw the first movie, this one we watched a long time ago when I was a little kid. And my mom, I think, read like the first couple books. And then my dad started hearing that, we shouldn't be listening to it and you shouldn't be watching it because it has witchcraft in it and it's not good for your kids, it's not good for you. Like Christians shouldn't be associated with it. So he put a ban on our household, on me and my mom too, because she had read some of the books, basically put a ban, and he was like, oh, don't get into Harry Potter, which at this point, I mean, I'm like 7, no, younger than that. I'm like 6. I really don't care about Harry Potter at this point. I'm too young. And so I didn't really see like the point of like wanting to fight for that. And so I was like, okay, that's fine. But I remember I had friends and like older kids and stuff who were so into it, and they were like, it was just a thing that was around. It was like, you know, you had the Pokemon kids, you had the Beyblade kids, you had the Harry Potter kids. It was like a thing that was just very present. And when I was that young, I could get away with not really knowing that much because they're like, it's not really for younger kids. But then a couple years later, I'm a little bit older. I'm around the age you're supposed to start like reading Harry Potter, which is the age he is in the first book, which is 11. I think I'm like 9, and so close to that age. And my dad has grown spiritually at this point. He's listened to better pastors, and he's like, hey, as long as you know that it's just fiction, you can read it, you can get into it. I don't know if you remember AR. I don't know if you had AR in your Christian private school, Will. AR is called accelerated reading. Do you have any experience with AR? Did you do AM, accelerated math?
I mean, I did. I think I had a few, we call them AP courses, but they were honors classes. We had, I think there was honors English, I think there's honors math, but they were just in name only, really.
Yeah. So AR, maybe you had that for when you were teaching, but AR is called accelerated reading. And it was this idea, they did with math too, but AR was a big deal in my elementary school. You read books and then you would take tests on these books. And if you got like, I think above like an 85 on the test, you would get however many AR points that the book was worth. And if you got so many points at the end of the semester, or the end of the year, you got like a prize. And they were like, it was a big deal. Like there were kids who were super into AR. And there was also like a quota we were supposed to meet. We were supposed to read so many AR books by the end of the year. And at this point, I didn't really like reading. I was not into it. I would get into it later with different kinds of books, not fantasy books. But Harry Potter series was huge because they were big books. They were like, I like big books and I cannot lie books, you know, and they were worth like a lot of AR points. And so I needed to get my AR points up. And so my teacher was like, oh, Hannah, try the first Harry Potter book. Like she thought that this would be my gateway drug into reading was the Harry Potter series. And so I tried to read the first Harry Potter book when I was like 9, I think, and which is the one this movie's based off of. And I got about halfway through it and it just sat in my like locker / cubby. I didn't even finish it. And then I think I got overdue because it was a library book and I had to return it. Basically, I got bored with the book halfway through. That's my personal story with Harry Potter. I feel like that's very reminiscent, very true to what we experienced with the movie. That even though I was like, it was banned, I'd never really had a connection to it, even when I tried.
So I grew up in a very, I dare to say this, sheltered home where the topic of Harry Potter wasn't even really graced upon my parents' lips. I was so hidden away from that part of pop culture that I really didn't know anything about it until I got to 10th or 11th grade when I couldn't really escape it. My school did a complete ban of it. You couldn't find it. A couple times you had kids who would bring it in and read it for free time, but I wasn't really interested. I was very much a Batman superhero kid growing up.
You went to a Christian private school.
Yes, I went to a Christian private school. So the books were banned, the movies were banned. You couldn't really escape people talking about it, but it was in kind of bated breaths. It was not a widely discussed thing because it was considered frowned upon. And so I went through high school while the movie series was ending, so I never really got into it. So by the time I was in college, the time that I would have found interest in it was gone. I grew up with The Lord of the Rings, and I grew up with the Chronicles of Narnia, where magic wasn't seen as a bad thing because the magic was just a literary tool to get across more important messages, that the intent behind the magic wasn't the occult or witchcraft or power as much as it was an instrument to tell a story. And the intent behind it was to use it to aim towards the bigger imagery, the bigger story at hand. And so I was immersed in Chronicles of Narnia. I was immersed in Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. And so by the time I was an adult, by the time I got through college, the time for me to have any interest in Harry Potter was gone. I ended up seeing the first Fantastic Beasts movie, and I was slightly interested, but I was also more confused because, much like this movie, they don't take any time to really explain anything. They just kind of assume you've either read the books or you've already been used to this, and so there's no kindness to new arrivals. And so that was a big turnoff for me, and I never really went back. So this is kind of a coercive going through of the Harry Potter movies at this point.
Yeah, I like that we both are very ignorant of Harry Potter. I think that is going to make this series interesting, that we're really coming in blind. Like, we have not read the books, and we really haven't seen a lot of the movies. I've seen this movie, and I've seen Goblet of Fire, which is the one with Robert Pattinson in it. I know you're like, oh, you twihard. That I'm glad that we're going through it in the way that we are, where we're just like, we're riding blind. But I think it's going to be maybe enjoyable in the way where we just get to, we're watching it for the first time. And like, I think a lot of people feel like they want to be able to watch the series for the first time again. I don't know if we're going to feel that way at the end, but here we go. We're going to jump right in. I'm just going to get some stats about the movie real quick. So this movie came out in 2001, and Christopher Columbus directed it. No, I'm just kidding. Well, his name is Chris Columbus, but that was funny. And then Warner Brothers was the studio that produced it, and they produced all of them. And I think I know that Harry Potter World's at Universal Studios, but I believe Warner Brother, that was it Universal or Warner Brothers that came up in the beginning?
I don't remember, honestly.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I got Warner Brothers correct. Okay, so those are our little factoids about the movie, and we're going to go into the synopsis. So I'll let Will start the synopsis, and then whenever you want to just give it to me, I can pick it up.
I'm going to try to make this as short and sweet as possible. Basically, we're jumping right in with 3 wizards and a baby. They, which sounds...
It wasn't Tom Selleck in 3 Men and a Baby?
Yes.
What if Tom Selleck had been Dumbledore instead?
It would have been a lot more watchable.
Oh, wow.
So you had 3 wizards dropping off this baby on a doorstep with a note. Then you fast forward and you run into a mom, a dad, a son, and this boy that they have pretty much ostracized from their family. They are very verbally abusive to this ostracized boy whose name is Harry. And Harry keeps getting these envelopes in the mail telling him that he's destined to go to this place called Hogwarts. And his mean parents are like, hey, no, and he keeps getting these letters, and they keep increasing in number because he's supposed to go. And eventually, Hagrid decides to just show up wherever they're at and say, no, he's coming with me. And so he goes and gets whisked away to the magical wizarding world. He introduces him to this world, but basically they've said that everybody already knows who he is. Everybody already knows what he looks like, what he's identified as. That, like, there's no confusion, even though this is a child, and everybody just kind of like, this is him, even though they have never met this child.
They've never. Maybe they've seen him. We don't know how they.
But
spread news
again. Not explained. Everybody's already knowing this kid. Says he's like this destined child, and he's supposedly destined to be a great wizard like his parents. But there's a threat on the horizon because the person a wizard who went bad, who ended up killing his parents, tried to kill him, failed, and now this kid is kind of targeted for revenge by this evil wizard. So they're trying to train him to be a wizard so he can either defend himself or so he's safe from this bad guy. And so they take him to Hogwarts where he's supposed to get trained to be a wizard.
Right. And then to make it clear, the people he lives with are his aunt and uncle. So his mother, sister, and her husband. Those are his guardians, but they are abusive to him. So they go to Hogwarts, and he meets the Weasleys, the redheaded family, and meets Ron, who I'm assuming becomes his best friend. I'm pretty sure that's how that goes. They also meet Hermione, which is the what is her name?
Hermione Granger,
the actress.
Emma Watson's
character. They form like the trio, and this is going to be the core trio throughout the films that we follow. At Hogwarts, they come in as first years, and this is like a boarding school. I know it's taking a lot from like the very old English boarding school, like preparatory academy type of feel and vibe. So they have dorms that they live in, and when they first arrive, they put them in houses, which is like the famous, what's your Hogwarts house? And all three of them get sorted into Gryffindor, which now I'm thinking, I wonder why they're all in Gryffindor. And why would they not be in different houses from like a writing standpoint? I guess like that it gives you an excuse for them to always be together, but I feel like it would have been more of like a diverse, like.
Mm-hmm. Think of these houses as almost teams, like you would think of like sporting teams now, with like a loyalty thing where, I support the Philadelphia Eagles, and so I'm going to hang out with these people, and they really want you to believe these are like they're supposed to be your family, but we don't really see anything familial about any of the way they treat each other in this film. People
have criticized this because basically what they're doing, the sorting hat, which is a magical hat they put on you, and it looks in your brain and your mind, and it's like, you're a Gryffindor, you're a Ravenclaw. But the criticism is that grouping kids together by their common personalities, it surrounds them with the same type of personality type that they are, kind of stunts their growth. Because if you are more diverse, like you learn more. That's like, as a teacher, I don't know if that's something you were trained in about like different learning styles and different, so people have criticized that aspect of the story. So I was thinking about when we watch My Hero, and they have like class 1A and 1B, and they have like they're very like pro their class, but the way that they get into those classes is just randomized. Like it's just like by name or like birth date or something like that, but not this one. They are sorted into a house by their personality type completely. So it's like if you did all of your schooling with only, you were an INFJ and you were only with INFJs, and you never had really experience with like another personality type. I know their classes are mixed with houses, but I mean, you can see where people have kind of like, this may not be the best thing. So all three of them are put into Gryffindor house, and then they just start going through their normal lives. Like, as normal as Harry can make it. He's like trying to keep up with the new world that he's in.
Which feels forced because you would like think, okay, they're going to have normal classes. They'll have a science course or they'll have a history course. No.
The core curriculum, non-existent. Yeah, they don't do regular stuff. Yeah. It's just magic.
It's like, you arrived here and you're 11. You've already peaked. You've already learned how to read to the best of your ability. You don't have any learning deficiencies, nothing you're stunted in. We're going to teach you how to create potions and spells. And
even in My Hero, they have like English class. They just have like math that they're doing. They have like algebra. But no, it's just like potions, defense against the dark arts. It's like, where's like the calculus? Like where are they learning the regular science? I guess they don't need science because in the magical world. So then Harry meets Snape, who's played by Alan Rickman, the late great Alan Rickman. And he is he comes off very unsettling towards Harry, and Harry doesn't have good vibes from him. And he kind of humiliates him in the first day of his class. And so he's like a shifty character. He meets Dumbledore, who is the head master, the dean of the school, who, everyone's like the mentor character. Professor McGonagall, who I forget what she teaches, but she's kind of like a stern, like almost like a godmother figure, kind of. She kind of swoops in and like takes them under her wing whenever she needs to. And then he meets Professor Quirrell, who's the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and he's really like flighty and like odd. And he's just trying to adapt to this world that he didn't know he was a part of because his guardians, his aunt and uncle, never told him that wizards were real.
Which again would be fine if it just also didn't spin into he's now investigating these mysteries, and he's all of a sudden no longer are they like children. They seem to have like these brilliant ideas that pop in their head to where they put on these investigations into forbidden rooms and hidden areas because they're now trying to figure out what's going on, and there's like secret dungeons, and they're doing stuff 11-year-olds wouldn't naturally do. There's no real reason for them to have inclination to do this except for this character is shifty, we're going to go investigate him.
Yeah.
And then it kind of starts unfolding, but now they have no real inclination nor skill to go and do any of this except for...
Yeah, I think we're going to get into that in the talking points, but this school is like, oh, Hogwarts is it's like the most safe place in the wizarding world. And they literally are like, no, you can't go in the forest around the school grounds because there's evil there. Don't go on the third floor. They're housing like random magical items all throughout the school, and they're just neglectful as professors. Sometimes it feels like they just aren't there. There is no real safety in what they're trying to do with their students.
It's not only neglectful; they're willfully ignorant because the students are like, hey, this thing's going on, or this person's acting weird. No, let's just go back to what we were doing. And they already know these things exist. It's not like, surprise, a troll exists. It's like, oh, a troll got in.
Or no, they had the troll in the school already.
No, the troll was from the outside. The troll got from the dungeon up.
So before he got to Hogwarts, Hagrid had him, and Hagrid took him to Gringotts the bank to get his money that was left him by his parents. But while he was there, he also he had a mission from Dumbledore to get something from a vault. And this starts the mystery of what is this item, because it's told about in the news. Like they're like, oh, this was someone tried to break into Gringotts and get this thing. And through detective work, through like Hermione just like knowing what books to read, and then like Harry fitting it together, they find out that it's the Sorcerer's Stone, aka the Philosopher's Stone. If you are a Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood fan, you know what we're talking about. And that they believe that Snape is trying to get it at first. And then as they work it out more and more, they're like, oh no, he who shall not be named, Voldemort's back and he wants it. And so they go on this huge journey, and they go through like all these different levels of like spells and enchantments that have been put in place to protect the stone. They get to the end of this. Harry's the only one who makes it to the very end. And there's Professor Quirrell there, not Snape. It's revealed Professor Quirrell is a vessel for Voldemort. Voldemort's actually living on his body at this point. And he wants the Philosopher's Stone so that he can have his own body. That's what Voldemort wants. And so he tries to use Harry to get it. Harry magically is able to overcome everything. And he's just like, he has his power, and he gets the stone magically. And then he like faints, or no, he passes out at the end. He wakes up and Dumbledore's there. And Dumbledore's like, oh, because you had the love of your late mother and your friends, that's why everything worked out for you. And then he goes home for summer break, and that's the kind of the end of the first movie. I skipped over a lot of stuff because there's a lot. That's another thing about this movie, is that it's so choppy because it has so much that's in the book that it's trying to get through. It just keeps hitting you with scene, plot point. And so it's hard to remember every single thing that happened. And I feel like there was a lot left out even after all that.
Yeah, no, I this is one of the few times that I actually have to pause a movie because I'm too overwhelmed by all the information they're throwing at us, and yet they don't throw enough information at us. They just flood us with content, but no backstory to the content, no information to the content to give us a reason to care. There was no. I told you that it wasn't until the last 45 minutes that they actually got a purpose for what they were doing, other than we're at school, watch us be at school.
In reality, that's what all their lives should be really concerned about, is that we're at school. But that goes straight into our first talking point. So is the world building. So this is a fantasy genre, which means that it is a different world from our world. So like the world building, introducing us to to the world, but also getting us familiar with the rules of the world. So in this world, they have magic. We had a couple questions about how magic works and what's the limitations of magic, and like, why don't they just do things a certain way because they have magic?
Yeah, and they don't explain that at all. They don't give you any reason. Like, why do they have to say spells? Why do they have to say spells? Why are some things said in almost Latin while other things are said very plainly?
Like Humpty Dumpty, boopity boo.
Right. And then why do they need a wand? Why can't they just use their hand? Why do they need to there's no explanation. We're supposed to be seeing this movie through the eyes of this 11-year-old boy who's never been exposed to magic at all in his entire life. And even he is just like, but an hour in, he's like, I got this. I figured it out. And yet they keep calling him such a great wizard. And correct me if I'm wrong, does he ever say any does he fully do a spell this entire film?
The only thing I can think of is that he takes to flying on the broomstick like really quickly, and he becomes the seeker. That also felt very Mary Sue-ish. It felt very like, oh, you're the special one, you're the special boy.
He's been there like 3 months, and they're like, he's destined to do this. Any child who's been at, like, if you're just joined 9th grade and you've been there 3 months, they're not going to just throw you into an advanced course.
It's not even 9th grade. It's like 6th grade. He's 11 years old.
Right. So we're supposed to be seeing this film through his eyes as he's learning what it means to be a wizard. And they don't do any of that. They just drop you in, pull you along, and you're just supposed to catch up. So I was telling you, I'm like, if you don't come into this movie with reading the books as the background, you are lost. And they are going to leave you lost until you figure it out.
We gotta study up on the lore because you can't really deduce it. We were like how they got to Hogwarts. So at one point, Hagrid's like, okay, get on the train. And then he is there to greet them at Hogwarts when they get there. And I'm like, why did he not just take Harry with him to Hogwarts?
Or go on the train with them?
Well, he said he had to go to Hogwarts and get there like early and meet with Dumbledore, but he could have brought Harry with him, but he wanted him to like go on the train for some reason. And then it's like, why do they need to take a train to Hogwarts? Why can't they just teleport there? Then they get there and there's like a moat and they have to like take boats across. And I'm like, can't they just make like a magical bridge? Like they're using like technology and like modes of transportation. And I'm like, what can magic do? What can it do? Are there like things it can do, but it's really not considered wise to do it, so they don't? Like, that's not explored really. Maybe, and we have 7 more movies after this. Maybe they'll get more into it. I'm afraid they will get more into it, and it'll be more contradictory and confusing as we go along. There was, yeah.
I would just kind of comparative because I like to compare better things to less better things. When you first jumped into the Fellowship of the Ring, what is the first thing that movie did?
It showed you the Shire, right? It shows you the complete backstory of the ring.
Right.
And it goes over the history.
It gives you the history of the ring. It gives you the history of the battle that came before this.
All the other rings that exist.
It gives you what's going on, why there's strife, why is there turmoil, and then it's like, now you're here. So anything that's addressed later, you've already got this filled in, this information. Now, I'm not expecting Harry Potter to give me a 15-minute backstory. Hagrid should be like, hey, I said you're a wizard. This is what it means to be a wizard. Here are the, things that pop culture says that wizards are. This is not true. This is actually what we do. They don't do that. They're just like, whatever you think a wizard is, that's what a wizard is. And there you go. And so that's something that was really hard because I was trying to immerse myself into this magical world, and I'm sitting here confused more than anything.
Yeah. So the next point, our next talking point, which we can still talk about the first one, but we talked about Lord of the Rings. So the first Lord of the Rings came out in 2002.
I believe so, yeah.
Which is a year after this movie. And they've made all those films back to back. They filmed all the principal photography and then they released them as they worked on them. And Lord of the Rings is like, at this point, doing like basically setting up filmmaking for the next 20 years because they're doing like the early stages of motion capture. They're doing like CGI environments with like CGI characters in CGI environments / real people, real actors filmed on like a blue screen. And then we actually saw a couple videos where these people are talking about how they did it actually very, very well in Lord of the Rings with like the lighting and all those things. So we wrote down on our little thing after we watched Harry Potter, the first one, about how bad the CGI is in this movie. And it's 2001, but then you compare it to like Gollum a year later and it's kind of insane. I know my thought was like, maybe Peter Jackson just had the right people because he was doing something that was different and new. The way that they use CGI, it takes you so much out of the movie when it happens. Like you can tell they're little animated characters that are like flip-flopping around. And I feel like there have been more clever ways to film that would have been more immersive than what they did. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted your opinion on the CGI of the Harry Potter.
Oh no, in one of these in a movie like this, I get where they're like CGI is pretty much mandatory. But I think it would have also benefited from a lot more practical effects.
Yeah.
I think more, to make it feel more magical, I think having more scenes where inside the school it feels like practical effects, like things moving or, you know, books moving or whatever, makes it feel better, so that when the CGI pops up, it's like, okay, it has to be here, and so I have to be able to be like, okay, that's fine. But I mean, everything is CGI that isn't a person in this, and so when you get to the Quidditch match where they're flying around, it's awful. It looks really bad. But then you get to the troll, and the troll looks like something out of a PS2 game.
Yeah, and there is one scene where they're practicing flying, and Draco Malfoy is on his broom, and it's the actor on like a blue screen. It's really him. I can tell he's not CGI, and it looked fine. It wasn't distracting, and so I didn't understand why they didn't do more of that, especially with the Quidditch match scene. I mean, I don't know. I need to see behind the scenes.
Even more so when you get to the Cerberus. And you look at the way they do it, that looks actually pretty good. The nose is wet on the dogs. The fur looks good. It doesn't look creepily, unrealistic.
Like uncanny.
Right. But then you get to the troll, and the troll looks like a joke. It looks silly. It doesn't look like a threat to them.
Yeah. So I learned, I forget the name. Do you remember the name of the YouTube channel we watched where the three guys are talking about the CGI? They talked about with Lord of the Rings, the reason why the CGI was so well done is because they worked so hard on the lighting to make sure that the lighting was like the same with the real photography and in the CGI environments that they created, and that the light was realistic looking. And I think that, like, because when you meet the Cerberus or Fluffy or whatever you would call him, it's all blue. Like, all the lighting's kind of this blue, like, dark, like, mysterious lighting. But because it's all the same lighting, it looks better, because when they're in a bathroom when they're fighting the troll, and it's like more well lit in a way, and you can tell it's not great. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like making sure the lighting is motivated correctly and looks realistic enough and matches the scene around it. I think that was a big one that was a disservice to this film. But yeah, just to think about, a year later we had,
right,
Peter Jackson's.
But to be fair, to not completely throw this movie under the bridge, George Lucas and Attack of the Clones had the same problem this movie did, where they depended on CGI when they either didn't have the full understanding of it, or they depended on it too much or incorrectly, and it makes it look bad and it looks dated. Because if you go back right now and watch Attack of the Clones, same problem this film has, where the CGI and the real people look like they're in two different planes of existence. They don't look like they're occupying the same area.
What year was that?
Around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So going on to still filmmaking techniques, we have cinematography and lighting. So I will say, have you seen any clips from the later films?
We watched the last 30 minutes together of the last film, and that's about it.
So that the color is just gone. Like, I don't know when that happens. I know that the first two, because the first one is very warm and bright, feels very childlike and whimsical, and the stakes are not that intensely high. And then eventually it turns into like a metaphor for World War II, and it becomes very almost grayscale, very highly dramatic, and like the characters just go through more and more trauma. So I'm going to see how we react to that as it goes on, but it almost feels like a weird, not a lie, but it feels like they're enticing you with this first movie, where it's like, this is about this little boy and he's special, and they have the music and the little John Williams score, and there's a train, and he has a wand, and it's like, and there's this wonderful mentor Dumbledore and everything, and it's like, it's going to get so dark. Metaphorically, figuratively, literally going to get dark. And so I really appreciate the cinematography we saw. It felt so, I love that warm, cheery brightness, but I know it's not going to stay around long. What are your thoughts about the cinematography?
I mean, the big thing that I liked that was the lighting. I felt there was basically anything that was in the school felt real, felt like it was a real place. And I know it was a location, but it felt like I was immersed into it. The lighting was really beautiful. The rooms felt lit when they're supposed to be lit. They felt kind of eerie and dark when they were supposed to be. It felt like a real tangible place. But then once you got outside, especially on that Quidditch field, it was like, this doesn't feel like a real existence. So props to the cinematography for anything that happened in the school, because it looked really good.
I've always really liked the lighting in the very final scene when he has the stone and there's like fire everywhere. And I think it's Professor Quirrell makes that like wall of fire to keep him from leaving. And just the way that it's so like films today are not bright enough. I like when films have a lot of light and they're bright and it just gives so much life to like the characters. But like that scene where he's like holding the stone, you can see like the fire reflecting and like in the stone. It just, it feels so magical. It feels so fantastical in the way that fantasy is. I mean, like, another scene that always stuck out to me that I always thought about after I saw it when I was a kid was that one where they're in the forest, and it is all just one color, just blue. But the way it's shot, like, I remember, like, that scene with the unicorn, because they really used color to really set moods. Like, they wanted something to feel, like, cold or dark versus hot, you know, and bright. And I really like that. I miss when films used color and were bright and used color to tell their story. And I feel like, I think they call it the, what's his name? Saving Private Ryan effect or something like that. Basically, Spielberg wanted Saving Private Ryan to almost look black and white. He wanted it to, so it could feel like those old photos and feel very realistic. And then after that movie, people just started making every serious movie really like dull and gray. And then we even see that with Marvel. Like Marvel sometimes is like just bleak when you look at it color wise. Marvel is like, that's the biggest genre we have going for us right now. So every time I see this movie, I think about those earlier films and how bright and colorful it is. And I'm like, we see it leave. Okay, so the second to last. I took the things we wrote down and I put them, and whenever we said the same thing, we put them together. And one thing that we both picked on was the sloppy ending. So we get this whole movie, it's almost 2 hours long, and it kind of builds and builds and builds this mystery. And they're like, oh, we got to get the Sorcerer's Stone. And then they go through these, different layers of like having to get to where the stone is. They get there, and Harry just kind of magically wins the battle. Do you want to talk about that?
So you get to the end of the dungeon. He runs into his professor, realizing that the professor was corrupt the whole time. And he's like, the professor's like, where's the stone? Where's the stone? And Harry's like, I don't have it. Why would I have it? Because
why would he have it?
He has no reason to have it because we've not seen it this entire film. And then all of a sudden he has it in his pocket.
There's that mirror is there, that mirror that shows you your desire or whatever.
Right. So the mirror is supposed to show his like deepest desire, but it shouldn't appear in his pocket in real life. It should be like, oh, this is where it will be, or somehow it's going to end up there. And then like that should have been like a build up to somehow or another he has it. He just reaches down. Oh, it's here. Where? Why? Who put it there? Why is it there? And so it seems almost real nonsensical / forced. Like, oh, we have to get it into this scene somehow.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know. He just has it. It's like, that's how it, like the writer's room was like, I don't know. It appears in his pocket. But I think that Dumbledore explains it later, this is what we talk about sloppy ending. Like all these things happen that just kind of save the day. And then Dumbledore's like, this is why it happened this way. I think he says that there's like, they put an enchantment on the stone that only a person who wanted to find the stone but not use it could find it. And so that's in that situation was Harry.
Ridiculous. He wanted to find the stone, but he didn't want to use it. And therefore the stone found him,
But Voldemort tries to get it from him, and he puts his hands out so Voldemort is part of Professor Quirrell. Puts his hands out to stop him, and when Harry touches him, he starts to disintegrate, and he's like, look at his hands, like, what? It was like, I said it was like Shigaraki, like with decay, and he's like, I don't know what's going on, and he kills Professor Quirrell. Like, this little 11-year-old boy has murdered someone at this point, but he puts his hands on his face, he completely disintegrates, and he's like, oh, great, I won, and then Voldemort, in his, like, spirit form, is like, rah, and then, like, goes away, which means that Voldemort's still out there, obviously. He doesn't have a physical body to inhabit right now, but he's looking, but then, Harry passes out, and then he wakes up and Dumbledore tells him about why he found the stone in his pocket, and then he's like, your mother loved you and she sacrificed herself for you, and that gave you that power that you needed at that time. And it once again felt very lazy, and I do understand where they wanted to go with that. They wanted to say that love was powerful than any power or magic. Like, it was more powerful than any type of magic that he had. And I totally get that, but it did feel very, I don't know how else to say it. Like, I wrote down Deus Ex Machina, kind of like, well, that's how we solved the problem. He didn't die because his mom loved and him. His friends.
My thing is, we see this as a trend in a lot of fantasy movies and a lot of magical-esque movies, is that love is more than just a emotion or a feeling or a way of communicating to another person. Becomes this metaphysical, otherworldly power that is a fix all, that can mend any wound, that can destroy any evil. And we see that in real life, love is very powerful. Love can change dynamics and situations. Love can mend relationships. But love shouldn't be this, this fix all that if, everything is tapped out and all our powers are out and we don't have any hope, all of a sudden we have this like love that can like surge through us, that can give us this extra otherworldly boost, because now you've taken love and you've trivialized it, because the real life love that we experience on a daily basis is way more powerful than anything that's depicted in something like this.
I think the inclination though to see love as like a power that is like all knowing and all powerful is because God is love, and it's spiritually like there's a spiritual inclination given to us, which God says in the Bible that we all know intuitively, right? That of the truth of God.
Right.
So I think that's where that comes from, where they want to write this, where they're like, this is just so deep and it sounds right. But so when they write something like that and they say, oh, like love with its power, but they don't have like a substance behind love. It's like, it almost feels like an empty word when they're like, the love of your friends, the love of your mother, you were able to use it as this power. The thing that we know intuitively that love is a power is because God is love, and he is the one that's all powerful, and he is the one who's in control. And that love needs an object, and that not object, but like a source to go towards when we love God, and then God loves us. And so I think that's where that comes from. They have this idea that like love is this thing that we can't explain or understand, but that's because they don't have the substance of the reality of who God is behind it.
I think when we get displays of love like this, or you get those magical romantic movies where it's a very physical thing, I think we dip into the trivialization of love. We get the trying to paint it into a box that it can't fit into. And you're on the right track with this idea of like, they have the idea, but they don't have the mode for it. Mm-hmm. So they just try to put it into a scenario that they can try to nail it down with. Again, it's very like, it's trying to describe the wind. You can't, put it into a box. You can't nail it down somewhere. You can't really do anything but show how it affects things. And so when you say, oh, it's this power that made me be able to conquer this villain, it's hard to really have as a palette, because you're like, it doesn't feel right. But neither does like these really fancy Love Actually kind of movies where this love is this overpowering feeling. There's something more there. Neither of these options give us a good idea for, but we understand that love is more than that.
And in the movie, Dumbledore says like, oh, it was the love that your mother gave, the sacrifice she made. But we recognize that love because it is a reflection of God. The relationship of a mother to her child can only exist because God exists, and that is something that is inherent in his nature. So of course the film misses that because it's not talking from that perspective, but it does feel so lightheaded when it's just like the power of love, and you're like, there needs to be more here. Mm-hmm. It just feels so kind of, I can't think of the word. It's like not like a slap in the face, but kind of like cheesy, but just there's no substance there. There's no like power behind it, but there is, but it's not enough. Mm-hmm. to justify all that happened in the film, that what Harry did and what he could do. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last talking point. Okay, so this is really talking about the message. We talked a little bit about the message of the film already. And so this is what we said we saw that was good in the film. That was like what it was trying to say as its themes, its message, what it's trying to teach children, because this is a kids movie at this point. So it does acknowledge good and evil. There's a part where Voldemort's like, there's no good or evil, there's only power. Obviously, Voldemort's the villain, so he's lying. And they do acknowledge that there's this idea of good and evil, and that they equate good with love and friendship. And once again, we said that we can say that we can equate love and friendship with goodness because God is good and he is love, and all those things. But they don't go down that route, but they do have the right association there. And then we said about Dumbledore's lesson. So there's a mirror that's in this movie that Harry finds that shows you the deepest desire of your heart. When he looks into it, he sees his parents. He has always wanted to meet his parents. And Dumbledore finds him and he says, I don't want you to look in this mirror anymore because you shouldn't waste your time on these dreams and, not focus on reality and forget to live. And so I thought that was a really interesting lesson. I think it was very deep. I feel like if I was 11 and watching this, I wouldn't understand exactly what he was talking about. It's really like you're an older type, you've lived a little bit and understand what he's talking about. But it is interesting how he's like, there's things for you to do here. You can't just waste away thinking about what could have been. Do you have any thoughts on those 2 points?
Yeah. So the idea of the idea that wishing away your days and fantasizing or thinking about the what ifs does hinder your growth. It does hinder you moving forward and actually making those dreams a reality, or moving on and making new aspirations in your life. I think there's wisdom in that. I don't think it's completely bad to think about what could have happened or to hope and fantasize about the future, but what the danger is that you spend so much time dreaming and hoping and planning that you never actually take into action anything.
Yeah.
And then you miss opportunities, you miss friendships, you miss what you could be doing, what things you need to be doing. And the warning would be that if he kept playing around with this mirror, if he kept fantasizing about this mirror and these what if scenarios, and they became these desires of his heart, but he never actually worked on his schoolwork or worked on his friendships or became a better, stronger person, if he was just fantasizing about what could have happened, he's never going to move on and see what he can be with the future he has in front of him.
So I feel like he, instead of just thinking about, my parents, he has Ron and Hermione now that are real friends that are right there that he can actually be with.
And I think one other thing, just sorry to interrupt, but if you think about it, he never knew his parents. So all he's seeing is these images of them. He sees what they looked like. But now he's sitting there so long from this mirror that he's just fantasizing what they were like, fantasizing what that relationship would have been, how they would have treated him. And so now he's going off into this rabbit hole of what ifs and thoughts that, again, he can never know what the reality would be. And so the more he's living in these what ifs, these potential realities, the less he's actually going to not only live today and live in the moment, but also fully invest himself in the situation he's in there with his friends and the school and the opportunities he's been afforded. Doesn't mean he can't think about what could be, but if you think about what could be but never take into action anything, then you're not moving forward. You're just stagnant.
Yeah, I do. Okay, here's another thing about the whole world and the limitations of the world. There are like tons of ghosts that just hang out and you can talk to them and talk to them about their life and everything at Hogwarts. And I'm thinking, well, how did they become ghosts? What constitutes them becoming a ghost? Can Harry talk to his parents from beyond the grave? Because we have an example of it that these people can. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
I was less concerned about that and more concerned with, so he spends his time worrying about this mirror and, finally seeing what they look like. And then at the end of the film, Hagrid hands him a book that has a moving film of his parents holding him as a baby in it. And he's like, oh, meant to give this to you. And it has an actual photo. For the first time, he's seeing an actual photo of his parents. And he's seeing himself being held by them and them lovingly looking down and taking care of him. And I'm like, why did he
wait till the end of the year to give this to him?
Yeah, this is actually better than the mirror because now he can actually see his parents holding him and loving him. And he's always gonna have that. A
real moment that happened, supposedly. I don't know how magical photos work. They're like GIFs that move on paper.
But I'm like, that's like if somebody let you see a picture of your parents from when they first got married before they got to know you. And then you're like, oh man, I wonder what they would have been like. And then, 2 years later, somebody hands you a videotape of you being held by them in the hospital and them talking about you and loving you, which is better. The video of them actually taking care of you and loving you. So why would you?
I don't know, man. But that wraps up our first podcast of 2023, talking about the first Harry Potter film. I am excited to get into the rest of it because there's so much more. This is just the surface. There's a whole story that takes years of this character's life, and we get to unpack it as we go. But yeah, so we're just two muggles living our lives and enjoying Harry Potter films for the first time. So do you have anything to say about Harry Potter before we sign off for the first one of 2023?
I'm really hoping it lives up to the box office hype that everyone had it for it, because this first one was rough.
Yeah, Harry Potter is so culturally significant. Even now, there are so many people who are obsessed with Harry Potter. Like it's its own section of Barnes and Noble. It has merchandise that's still out. There's people who play Quidditch recreationally. It's become what's the word I'm looking for? Synonymous. It's become synonymous with millennial culture, which I'm like right on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z. But yeah, so we're gonna see what all the hype is about. Okay, well, that's Will signing off. Do you want to say anything?
Bye.
And this is Hannah, and thank you for joining us. And we will see you next time with the second Harry Potter film. Bye.